An expansion, a refinement, an attempt to get you to look even more specifically from one of the things I was talking about in an earlier taping. And that is, as things increase in complexity to a certain level, they can take on an additional dimension. Now let me put it to you in a more specific manner. That entities, objects, and processes, once they flourish and become complex at a certain tempo, the addition of a new dimension is inevitable. Now this is an expanded variation of what I told you last time about that they can. It is inevitable that they take it on, but it is not inevitable that people see it. Does everyone remember in a nice, staid, conservative, academic area such as biology that they used to use a term, I assume they still do, that they call response to change, all the way from amoebas to humans? They called it irritability. Back in high school and college, you didn't pay attention. You knew the word, you just wrote it down, and so that you tried to remember it when you had a pop quiz. But think about that. And they mean it in a non-passionate manner. That it is the irritability factor that is, as they describe it, the normal response to change. When humanity, now we're talking about all of the human creatures on our planet, as humanity, at any particular juncture that we were picking out, that would be arbitrary and artificial, but it would have to be longer than one generation. It'd have to be longer to really make this worth your while. Considered it would be longer than the average lifespan of a human. Under those conditions, humanity's entities, their institutions, their ideas, their arts, their politics, everything that would seem to be secondary activities, all kinds of activities that seem to naturally flow from the continued march of civilization. All of these things take on additional, and as I hope you'll begin to see, unexpected new dimensions on the level of humanity. But in an individual's lifetime, the time is too scant. It is too short, and therefore an individual, 60 or 70 years, does not perceive him or herself, nor do they perceive the people around them, nor do they really perceive life itself in its many institutions as taking on a new dimension. And that is at the heart of what I was going to try and get you to see, is one area of irritability that humans have, and it seems to be rather natural, even with the educated. There seems to be a rather natural animosity, if not, well, distrust, all the way from distrust to out and out hostility toward large institutions, toward the kind of general flow oftentimes of society. Why? I'm going to try and get you to see, at least intellectually, that things have taken on a new dimension on a large level, but the individuals cannot perceive it. And it's irritating. Now remember what I started out telling you. All of the entities that would fall within the range of the electromagnetic field that would make it reality to creatures on this planet, everything that you can think about, hear, smell, taste, etc. All of these things, and any of them, no matter what it is, if you called it religion, if you called it Protestantism, if you called it Presbyterianism, if you called it Marxism, if you called it politics in general, if you called it third world politics, if you called it the National Football League, if you called it professional sports, if you called it amateur sports, anything, any word representing some form of electromagnetic reality on this planet, any word in the dictionary that represents an entity of some kind, if it continues to flourish, that is to breathe, to live, an institution, an idea, a philosophy, if it continues to flourish, it is becoming more complex. And when it reaches a certain level, it continually adds a new dimension. And the new dimension is, there's no good word, I know I say this, but it's always unexpected. And it's unexpected to such a degree that an ordinary person cannot in their lifetime even perceive that this thing has taken on a new dimension. There is the heart from one explanation. It's not a problem in life for you people seeing this on tape at some other time in some other place. There's nothing wrong with life, nothing wrong with society, but for people trying to escape the gravitational pull of Earth intelligence, you've got to begin to see that what comes out as being irritability, what comes out as being forms of aggression, of criticism of life from the individual level, is indeed that which the individual believes that he or she is criticizing and being irritated by, that they pick out. Religion, a specific religion, some social norm, the sexual morality of their day, whatever it is, they find fault with it, but what they do not perceive is that whatever this thing is they're talking about, if it's still alive, and if it's still alive, or they would not be critical and irritated by it. What has happened is their intelligence is still back in time. As all of you should know by now, that your human nervous system, the same way as the universe itself, has different time zones. And that which might appear to be X amount of years old and developed, and that which might appear to be X to the factor of 10, coexist. It's just a matter of moving. It's a spatial matter. So what they're finding critical and irritating is that which they believe is irritating them. That which they believe is falling apart, is devoluting, is simply taking on a new dimension. That is, it is now a different creature, and they cannot realize it. And it's irritating. I want to make sure that the heart of that is plain enough. All aspects, take it on the sociological level, as it would be called, that we're not speaking about individuals right this second. That everything that seems to be the collective nature of human life on this planet. That's why I went through all those, I hope, extreme examples all the way from sports to politics to religion to individual relationships. Anything you can think about. If it is a continuing part of human activity, of human life, then it continually adds dimensions. It is not the same as it was at some more simplistic day, which could have been yesterday, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Is irrelevant. But even if it was changing, if something changed specifically, any area you want to pick out, philosophy, economics, politics, if indeed, if we said here in our part of the world, it changed so dramatically that it did, in fact, take on a new dimension in the last 10 years, then no ordinary person alive now recognized it. They didn't recognize what I said, that it took on a new dimension and it is now a new creature. An active creation has happened. They realize this if they are interested in it, if they are generally wired up to be part of the magnetic pull of this activity and to be a part of the transfer of energies in that field, in that area. They realize this, that change is taking place. And the response to change is irritability. They do not see it as an added dimension. Change. Change. And that is the most positive that you can normally say about ordinary intelligence, is to try and make it sound as though it is rather impassionate or almost neutered. Well, it's changed. But that is almost a non sequitur in the intellectual life of ordinary people, because they would not even be commenting on it if in fact they could in some way perceive or accept an attempted explanation of whatever the area was, that, well, yeah, things have changed, but it's not either better or worse, it just changed. You are not generally wired up to even have any particular interest in that if you could accept that and say, well, it would have to be on the basis that you were trapped at a party and somebody said, do you realize you heard about the Italians falling out of the World Soccer Cup? You went, well, no, I don't keep up a lot. Well, let me tell you this. You know why they fell out? I'll tell you exactly why. They changed from a homegrown Italian coach. They imported a guy from Britain. And you go, well, my. You know. And the guy says, that kind of change is not progress. I don't know what they thought. I mean, I guess they thought that Britain was, turned out consecutively better soccer players, but that kind of change is not progress. They should have never done that. And you go, well, that sounds right to me. Well, I got to go talk to the host. I'll see you later. In other words, you had no interest. So you could take that if a voice jumped out and grabbed your intellect and said, well, that kind of change, do you believe that was good or bad? You say, I don't know. I don't care. I was just humoring the guy. I don't know beans about soccer. I don't care. But if you are wired up that you are a part of the kind of internal neurological playing field upon which such discussions take place, that you hear it talked about or you read about it, you're not going to perceive under any ordinary conditions that the change has been an additional dimension. Now, why I keep saying additional dimension, I assume, I'm going to point out my assumption that you understood that I was saying that it was in some way an enriching step, not a negative step, not a step backwards. If things are becoming more complex, they are more alive. And if they're more alive, they're more alive. And we're not talking about going backwards in any degree. The individual. Now, having said that, the part I wanted to be sure that give you an opportunity to see fairly clearly when I backed up for a second, past the point of what I said was a kind of sociological look at it, of humanity as a whole. Now, what I described about things being alive, flourishing, and continually, inevitably, taking on a new dimension, it's true with humanity, but in the sense that I'm describing it to you verbally and that you can hear it, it is not true individually. Even if it were true individually, the human intellect cannot see it. But individually, an individual's life is too short, and they do not perceive that they have flourished and grown to such a degree that they took on a new dimension. A non-specific awareness of this is wired in to most of humanity, and I suggest to you again is what gives rise to such dreams as metaphysical transformations or spiritual awakenings, the interest in everything from novels to reading about other religions, the idea that in some way the gods or forces or nature at times just blows people's minds out to such a way that they see and understand things that they would have never done so through any kind of known routine means. That would, if it happened on some sort of general predictable scale, that would be going absolutely antipodal to what I'm just telling you. That would be the added dimension in one person's lifetime. But even if such things occur, you do understand they're so rare that people write books about them, and not that many books. And people who apparently went through it get a good reputation, at least after they die, so that nobody can really go check up on them and find out, did you really take on that kind of added dimension? Once the guy's dead, then everybody around him that's trying to still make a buck off of it can say, oh yeah, walk on water, he could lay down and roll on water. We all saw him, didn't we, gang? And everybody goes, yeah, we saw him. Buy our book and we'll describe it in more detail. At any rate, what I'm telling you is life is not wired up because of the kinds of time zones, because of the tempo at which things work, and because of other reasons that I'm not even going into, but they're almost so obvious that some of you should begin to suspect them by now. The individual amoebas, humans. The life of everything is such that the thing, even if it was an amoeba, or even if there was such a thing as society, if there was such a thing, a creature as the Democratic Party, or the Catholic Church, if that was actual being, an entity, the life of all of it, molecularly speaking, of the molecules involved that live and die in combinations. Of course, if you're a one-cell creature and that one cell dies, you got more problems than you do with a human losing 50,000 cells every few days. The creature, things are not wired up for any creature to have an awareness of any sort that they have taken on in their lifetime, that they have become so complex that they have taken on a new dimension. Again, I'll point out in a different way, there is a kind of motivational energy flowing through life that still comes out in humans' intellect, in the thinking about action, that still reflects a non-specific awareness of this, or else why would people attempt to do better? Besides the general non-verbal drive of life growing, which is the answer to all of this right now. But specifically, why do people go out and work 2 jobs? Why does somebody go back to school at night? Why does somebody take a correspondence course? Why does somebody take up exercising? Why does somebody change their diet? All of that. It is not just to lose weight. It's not just to be prettier. It's not just to make more money. It's not just to move up in the social scale. The non-specific drive is to make people become more complex, because it is happening with humanity and it is happening with individuals, but the tempo and this part of the universe is such that in one lifetime you do not turn around if you're ordinary. And you should know this. It's not pessimistic. It's simply a statement of unrecognized fact here, that you do not turn around to ordinary people and they actually take on any added dimension in their lifetime. But it's almost exhilarating at the ordinary level when people even show any promise of it, or when they threaten. If you got a friend or a brother, somebody in the family that age of 40 says, I'm tired of working in a factory. The kids are almost grown. All right, I'm going to keep that job. But I'm going to tell you, I always wanted to, by God. I'm going to med school. And the son of a gun, some way, gets himself into pre-med. It's just almost a little short live thrill about Jesus. Or to see somebody you hadn't seen in a few months and they've lost 100 pounds. They quit drinking or quit smoking. Or when somebody has done something that made them more alive, they're more complex, it has a little jolt on people. And it can have that kind of little jolt, as I was saying to you, individually, is one of the motivations, one of the energy sources behind individuals wanting to apparently do better in life. And it's not just the money. But it is almost a non-singable song of crying out that I would like to be more complex. And not for reasons, although it would come out in the secondary and the post-speech area of the brain, that people would have to fall back on, well, I want to make more money, I want to do more for my kids, or they might just say, I just want to be a big shot and push my old friends around, make them feel bad. But it is more than that. It is more than you could explain, that you could secondarily try and justify why you're ignoring your family and going to night school and working 2 jobs. But the thing is, there is a primary drive behind this, I'm saying, that is non-verbally based, and that is the drive that is making humanity become continually more complex. But in the one lifetime, it does not happen as a rule, said he with understatement that would do Winston Churchill proud. It is not the norm that individual, ordinary people become more complex enough that they take on an added dimension. That is part of the dreams, as I said, of mysticism. It's part of the dreams of sainthood, of people who are so otherworldly, which is a way of saying there's another dimension to them that we can't conceive, that they grew up in a life of privilege and they were part of the blank family of Europe, touched with royal blood. They walked out of it and went to work in the slums of Cleveland, Ohio, or Calcutta, whichever is worse. And they've given their life to this. And it may be some religion that you don't even have any interest in, but you think, geez, at least for a second you hear about it, that the woman or the man's still there after 40 years living in the gutter, and they've got a trust fund worth $147 million that they've never touched. And they just look so humble and so skinny and worn out. And even people who are not supporters of that religion, reporters, and other hairy creatures can make some comment about the person is almost, just almost otherworldly. There seems to be something to them that I just can't put my hands on. I don't know what to call it. They are, again, making a crude gesture intellectually toward, they're so complex there's no explaining it. And you don't have to agree with what appears to be the complexity. Like, why would somebody give that up? If I had a $147 million trust fund, I'd rather just spread money around every year to Cleveland and Calcutta, send them $100,000 to give away. But geez, I wouldn't do that. And I don't approve of that. And not only is he or she trying to do good, they're trying to convert these people to their religion. I don't approve of all that. You can say all of that, and yet it strikes you that there is a dimension going on here. This person is more complex. And it will not going to change your life, but it will make people go, wow. They are touched inside the sensual system. The nervous system sort of tingles, and it's on the basis that that is more complex, even though I don't understand it, even though at the point at which I can talk, I can say I don't even approve of what they're doing, or I think it's hogwash. They're still touched with, there is a dimension to this. When they won't say otherworldly or metaphysically, they're almost saying there's something to this person or what they seem to represent that goes around the corner somewhere, and I can't fathom what's happening. It's like another hand is up their knickers, making them do things I can't perceive. But in some way, I can't find fault with it. It makes me want to go, wow. That is not the norm, though. Think about it. Your own family, people you grew up with, and then, of course, look in the mirror. You can try to get more education. You can try and resculpture your body, and etc. But as far as there being some ordinary avenue available or some way that routine people take on this new dimension in their lifetime, and I could, of course, finally suggest that that is another part of the continuing dialogue that life runs out about the dreams, stories about life after death. That you're not going to do it here. You're not going to take on an added dimension here, but there is the chance to take on an added dimension, that you can be made better, that is more complex. You can become an enriched person if you blah, 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 and then when you die, it's like a fresh start. Except if you do right, if you get prepared, take the right actions now and the right thoughts, when this new time comes, you will be, no matter what they call it, they can say in paradise, heaven, a liberated Buddhist or a Jew or a real Christian, and what they're saying is, this next time when you get started all over, you will have a new dimension. You will be more complex. You will not be you. You'll be you, but there'll be something added to it. Right, another dimension. All right, now that was the two parts I wanted to try and make fairly clear, which took me 20 minutes to say what should have been 2 minutes. Who says it should have been 2 minutes? It's a pretty cheap opinion. All right. Yes. Man in the cheap seat said it, so what do you expect? Then, if you can just keep that part in mind, you can see a new way to look at being irritated, being critical, just having even a low-level need, desire that everybody has, that everybody wants to suffer a little, to be put upon, to be upset, to be hurt, to be disappointed. It's all being irritated. And one of the ways to see that occurring, I was trying to give you a new place through which to look before I stuck my finger in your was that external to you, as it appears, on a scale larger than your individual existence, hate to tell you, life continues to become more complex. just take the old simple equation of I plus not I equals everything, then all the not I's in you, that is everybody, continues past all generations, past all individual lifetimes, continues to become more and more complex, and as it does, everything in that life, all of its institutions, all of its ideas, all of its beliefs, as they still like to call it back home, become more complex, and they take on a new and unpredicted, an unexpected dimension. They become more complex, and in one individual's lifetime, they do not see this as an enrichment. They see it as an irritating factor, that things are not as they were when I was growing up. Things are not as they were in my neighborhood as they were 5 years ago, damn it. Can you see that there is a mathematics? Forget that. There is a physics, a non-specific physics at work, that it is impossible if you are one entity and you are wired up in such a way that you cannot in your life experience an increased complexity in your nervous system, in you as a totality. Or if you can, if you experience it, you cannot see it. Either way, it doesn't matter. If that be true, then do you see from there that if it is indeed occurring outside of you, the waters in which you, the little fish, and all other fishes are swimming, continue to become more and more chemically, biologically, physically complex, that if that be true, you cannot see it. Because if you can't see it in you, you can't see it on a larger scale. All you find it to be is you continue, you and everyone else, to have to respond to change. Irritability. From there, I would like to give you, or try and, shall I say, drag, or encourage you, or perhaps you're stepping right along. How about an August '89 re-examination of this as to what end, why do men, why are men made to so fondly look back on the irretrievable past? Why? And I have mentioned this from several different ways, at several different levels, enough times that I bet many of you have your own nervous system now to the point that as soon as you hear it, you, oh yeah, I know that. I assure you that none of you have a full-time Eastern Standard Time awareness of that. That continually, people are wired up in such a way that continually, through what might seem to be some external stimuli, or at times there seems to be none, that your own brain is churning out chemicals that just suddenly you have a longing for the past. That suddenly something reminds you of those dear early 1400s. Or 17 years ago, back when you lived in St. Paul. Or back 8 years ago when you was with your first wife or husband. It may seem to just spring, or it can apparently be triggered that somebody mentioned something about how things were right after the war in 1952. And just momentarily, and you do not analyze it, the system does not join itself and see what it is thinking, but there is a continual reaction that is wired up generally in people to favorably respond fondly, just for a few seconds, that you, generally speaking, will go, ah. It does not have to be specifically spelled out by somebody else that, boy, life is going downhill. Our country is going to hell. Of course, all countries are going to hell, and all countries at all times, all societies, all little groups of people have somebody telling them that. To lead the choir, everybody has that kind of naysaying Fred Waring, and out of every society, every tribe, every group, you always got enough for a full-blown choir to sing right along. Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's all over now. But you do not have to be that active in it But you should notice that it is generally wired up in everyone to look fondly upon the past. Just last week, at the job you thought you hated until they just, with no advance warning, went bankrupt and closed up. And now here it is, you're out looking for work if you had to temporarily take a job running an elevator. And now, just somebody you run across down at the employment office, you run across one of your fellow workers that you used to say one or two words a year to, and they go, hi, how you doing, how you doing? You go, God, don't you kind of miss the old place? And even if you don't answer, you do. And it may only last like that, but there is a fondness of looking back as the guy says, boy, I used to hate old so-and-so. Yeah, I did too. In those hours, yeah. But God, now it's gone. I kind of miss it. You may shrug or make a face like that, but there is a fondly looking back. Specifically, even, I pointed out to you that you should be able to see, although it sounds otherwise, the stories of life after death, almost confined to the entities of earthbound religion. The ideas of paradise, a payoff of heaven, is always a looking back. Now it sounds like it's a looking forward, that you got to go there and do right and then die and then you go there. But all ideas of paradise is a fondly looking back. That's all they're describing. It's always that. They don't, of course, use my terms or would have any propensity to use my maps if they heard them, but what they continue to refer to is a kind of regression of specific secondary activities that humanity has picked up as they became more and more complex. And it's a moving back. It's a finally looking back is all of their descriptions of heaven, of paradise, of how things will be better and you'll be more complex. Right, using those terms, you go, yeah, but it can't be done. Because they're describing you'll be a more complex person, but yet we're going to be more complex on this basis. All this modern stuff like situational ethics and being able to have sex when you're not married in our church, yeah, and cheating on your income tax, yeah, and eating fatty food, yeah, and having to put up with people of different nationalities or religions and races like you do now, yeah. We won't have any of that. You know, when we get there, it'll be just us. You know, it'll be a heaven of just us, 4 foot tall green people with purple hair. And you go very fondly, like, yeah, I can remember, and that's the way it was, because you can. You can remember when it was just you and your family. And some of you weren't adopted. Your parents, your brothers and sisters, were all little short green people with purple hair. And so when you hear stories about a great payday, the great eternal weekend after I die, it's not really the future they're talking about when you'll be more complex. It's really a finally looking back. We're back to the point that was all just almost one cell. It's just me and my family. Of us green people with purple hair that followed the pine tree religion, believed in inner tube economics. Yeah. As the gods intended. It'd just be us. And all those other people, you know what I'm talking about, the kind of people that are not green or have purple hair and believe in these other things, they won't be there. We'll be justified. We'll finally get the payoff for being the right thinking, right living people. But it is a finally looking back, while believing that we're talking about the future. Now, I said it was August '89. I was going to try to get you to re-examine part of it. Now, most of that I've covered in different ways before, but now let me expose you to an exposition on that. Or expose you to an, never mind. Exposure, except I didn't want to do that. In this same area. And first off, let's start here. I'm going to tell you that we're going to turn the tape over. What happened to abstract expressionism? Sure, the art world, as soon as they found out a lot of people can do it now, I know them, they dropped it. Oh. See if you cannot pursue this. After having said what I did about the final looking back, etc., I'm not just going to give you an opportunity to look at it in a contrary manner, because if we're going to do that, we could finally name this the irony union. Nah, it's a lot better than that. So see if you can listen. Having pointed out what I did, and then we'll drag in something again from the last taping, something new. After having pointed out this people being wired up, and you still should be asking yourself continually, to what ends? Because it has not been fully covered in your own brain yet. But it is there continually. Not just in ways that seem to be as wide in scope as worrying about or thinking about life after death, but just good old days, last week, childhood, family, ex-wives, ex-lovers, boyfriends, a fondness. But the fondness you don't even recognize. I don't mean you might say, well, I know sometimes I'll think about one of my old lovers and I'll go, I'll think about my old aunt that I hadn't seen in years and go, no. It's way beyond that. There's a dimension to it that you don't understand. It is basic to the general wiring system of humanity to finally look back. Now, having said that, yeah, I said that, all right. Having said that, now let me point out that there seems to be going on within this general area two modes. To wit, whilst thinking in such a way, an individual, while being wired up, and whilst thinking in such a way about humanity, people just in general, and themselves as being free and responsible, having at least some freedom, that there is absolutely, they're thinking right then, this individual I'm talking about, this kind of mode of thinking, that there is some real responsibility possible individually. Those affected by that mode do seem to have some ability to look to and apparently work toward the future, which is a more specific way. I was trying to get closer to the biology and the chemistry of it, of me saying that in general, or ask it sort of as a question a little earlier, why do you think that people try to do better, try to improve themselves? Now, if this mode was in operation in you, I know people would rather hear, if you were in such a mode, if you were thinking in such a way, that makes it sound a lot better, I know. In such a way, that by God, I will go back to school. Not just talk, you actually put it in process, put it in motion, you begin to act on this thinking of acting, and you begin to do it. And you do begin to save your money so that you can get into med school once you wrap up these missing quarters you had in undergraduate. And you actually start doing that. That kind of mode almost belies what I just said, that is, of humanity generally being wired up to finally look backwards, and are even subject to that kind of information flowing through the general river of human consciousness, that all progress, the better day was yesterday. And even if we're going to someday have a better day tomorrow, like after I die or sometime, the better day is going to be where? Well, back there. It's going to be that kind of thing brought up to date, which can't be done. But there would seem to be these two modes that life does have as a kind of sub-operational system. That some people at some time seem to be wired up in such a way that they can make some apparent effort and do think in such a way that tomorrow could be a better day. That where I should be looking finally, and not, they wouldn't be doing this theoretically, that is, where they should be, what they would say is their thoughts of fondness of a better day has got to be tomorrow. It will be if I can finally get through school and hang up my shingle. That will be better if I finally can get promoted to such and such position in the company. The second mode is generally what you should expect. That it would seem that while you are just in the mechanical, automatic drift of life, that is, that you apparently are not in the mode, that you have not apparently been energized in such a way that you are out actively planning and about to let it overlap with action to actually do something that would seem to make your life more enriched, that might bring a new dimension to your existence. If you're just sort of drifting, no matter if you're a doctor, a lawyer, or a ditch digger, if you're sort of drifting, that mode will continue to present the talking, thinking, higher end of the human nervous system with the picture that better days are not ahead. Better days, if there were any, were in the past. I've taken to where I was trying to point you, threatening at a more chemical, biological basis for all of this. If you would have to try and think in such a way as to get some notion of life's own needs. Now, of course, we're much larger than an individual. We're now much larger than any society, any group of people. We're much larger now than humanity. We're much larger than our solar system, etc. But the needs of life itself is such that you have got to have these two modes in operations. Or if you want to look at it in a more personal way now for a second, as these two groups. That you have some generally wired up that seem to have some vague motivation to think of the future as being alterable, that there is enough freedom, there is enough individual responsibility inherent in man's life that we individually must make effort. It's good for us. It will pay off. It's the only thing to do. Even if I work real hard and get my degree and get run over the day of graduation, you know, what the hell, I'd have got run over anyway, but at least I did something with my life. I did something. It was better than just sitting around here stagnating. That is a mode that is necessary for life. Now, not for the individual. It is for the individual, but you've got to understand the scale of things. It is indirectly. You might say it's a secondary necessity for individuals just because it's primarily necessary for life. You have also got to have within that this other group or this other mode, but if you want it as people, this other group, which without any kind of analyzation, they cannot be talked out of it. It is not based upon any form of reason, even if there was such a thing as reason. It's not based upon any sort of appeal or understanding of individual potential profits to the person. It is simply that within life, part of the necessity is that there be people wired up generally that to look back fondly, and what they do is support the status quo. They form a three-dimensional resistance to destabilizing change, which would be if too many people were wired up, if there was too much energy that was looking for better days tomorrow, that said that yes, it is possible to profitably change in your lifetime. It is possible for large segments of us, of society. We could do better if we would all just come to our senses and quit wasting money on foolish, debilitating habits and contribute money to worthwhile organizations. We could feed the hungry. Not just me, we could all do it. That we could do that. If there was too much of that, if there was not the necessary balance within the confines of the electromagnetic spectrum that defines our sensual existence, if there was too much of that, it would not be a good thing. The whole idea of too much of a good thing is not a good thing is correct. People don't understand it. But if you thought, well, it is anything that's beneficial to life's growth, anything that is now enriching life and enriching me indirectly is good. Okay, right. Now you think I've said that. But if it did not have the proper resistance, if there were not those there, and they're not all out there, some of them are in you. They're within every solar system that's alive. They're on every planet that's still growing. There has got to be the resistance to destabilizing change. And destabilizing change would be change that was so dramatic, if this could happen, which it can't right now, but if it did happen, it would be change that was so dramatic that the ordinary people would see and think that things over here have taken on, in my lifetime, right here in my awareness, a new dimension. That's how complex they are. But not complex is not an involuted affair. Things have blossomed more. Wow! I just say wow. I don't know what they would say, since ordinary people never see it, but if they suddenly did, I assume they'd say something like wow, or perhaps a bit cruder. That kind of change would not be beneficial. That kind of enrichment would not be enrichment. It would be destabilizing. It would be destabilizing if individuals in their lifetime became so complex right now that they knew it. If any of you think that's too weird, back to my old examples. If indeed, just taking the general systematic description as life lets people have it. If right now Christians, people in the Christian church, were actually could be Christians by anybody's definition, don't worry about mine, I'll take their definition. If they could do that, it would be bad news. If all the people who claim to be Jews in the full sense of the word suddenly were living, functional, exemplary Jewishness in action, it'd be self-defeating. Any other religion. And I'm not questioning at the ordinary level to say, all right, if anybody would be, I don't care what religion, if anybody would actually be a good Zarathustraner, a good Hindu, we'd all be better off. I could say, all right, I'd rather be living next door to a bunch of real pious Hindus than a bunch of muggers and crack dealers. But if you said that, and if you said, whoa, what if that religion could really spread? What if the Hindus would really get out there like the watchtower guys on the bicycles and knock on your doors, and the good Hindu idea of the reverence for life just spread everywhere and we all became Hindus? Wouldn't that be great? And the answer is no. It would be destabilizing if it was to the point that people individually, and it won't happen, I'm playing with verbal reality now, which you can do, but I just want you to see, because it's a reflection of the kinds of unstated parameters and boundaries that are extant now that you can't see, unless I exaggerate it and say that this could be going on now in another time or another planet. But if this could happen, that would seem to be good in small doses. To be, if everybody was a Jew, I'm talking about a real one. If everybody was a Muslim, a real one, God, wouldn't that be great? And you go, yeah. And the answer is no, it wouldn't. A little bit of it would be good, but too much medicine will kill anybody. If you take too much of whatever it is, you got a vitamin A deficiency, you need some. Vitamin B, whatever it is, you take enough of it, and many vitamins, as you should know, some of them are deadly, supposedly. At any rate, what would seem to be on a larger scale, and scale is not just spatially, it's not just three-dimensional, it's time-wise. If we could change the tempo in such a way that those sorts of things that seem to be, without question, of benefit to humanity, such as if we could all be better people. You can forget religion if we were just all more human. If we were all better atheists, humanistic atheists. As my good friend over here, whoever, Bertrand Russell was, good old Bertie. You think, well, that would be neat if everybody was more like him. No, it wouldn't. It would be destabilizing. Literally. It would tear the larger creature that is now alive, not the individuals, but the humanity of life. The creature that is now, as I was pointing out last time, that now this collection is more than the mere numerical combination of the individual parts. Humanity is more than the 6 billion people that make it up now. There's a thing, humanity, not just figuratively speaking, not just philosophically speaking, when I say humanity, and even ordinary people when they say humanity, and they don't understand it, but humanity is not 6 billion people. 6 billion people, if that's still what it is, that is the number of people on this planet. And if you got to call them something, you can say, well, that's the human race, or that's humanity. But it is now something else. We can say, all right, let's say that the 6 billion people is a human race, just so we don't start wasting our time really playing with words. That's the human race. All right, then there's humanity. In ordinary conscience, say, well, you're just talking about the same thing. They're synonymous. Yeah, I know. But humanity is something other than the race of man. The 6 billion people, they're right there, and we say, that's humanity. If that's not humanity, there is no humanity. Yeah, that's true. All the words here are out of Macbeth. They're in this box. I mean, they're there. But Macbeth is something else. You know, not only all the words, I said that last week, but I assume you understood, the stage directions, the costume suggestions, the whole thing is there in the box, in individual pieces. One word on every little slip of paper. The 6 billion pieces of little paper, that, yeah, you can say that's humanity, but the creature, humanity, is now something else. It's that, and then it's something else. That is, there is now another dimension to it. But the parts that make up cannot see it. The words, they're in the box. You can tell them, if they could hear you, could say, do you realize all put together you're Macbeth? And a word down here such as, you know, thee, or maybe the word Macbeth would say, I knew it. I tried to tell him. I told him we were something. Or we can say it. And he can even try to spread it around. I told you we were somebody. I told you there was more to us than just a bunch of collections of words or people. There's more to us than that. There's some greater function here. I heard the voice. You know, he thought I was God. A little civil paper, well, they know. I said, you realize that you're something more than an individual group of words? And the guy thinks, you know, this civil paper had a mystical experience. There is a creature, because it is now an added dimension, that is more, not just numerically, not just spatially, and not just chronologically in some way. It is more. It is a different creature. The play Macbeth is not the same thing as those words in the box. The words in the box make up Macbeth. No. There has to be within that box. If one of them got the message, if I could speak to the word Macbeth and he thought it was a mystical experience, and he tried to pass the word around, to make it simple, let's say that half the words in the box, let's say there's 6 billion words in Macbeth. He tries to get the message around. It even seeps through the box of all this. Half of them are going to say, I knew it, or I like it. Now that you say it, it strikes me as being true. I bet the God, you say God told you that? Yeah, some voice. Some voice that was not in this box, I can tell you that. It wasn't any of you guys said it. So half of them go, that's good enough for me. I mean, that's a mystical experience. Because it heard me, you know, in the box, I maybe reached down and touched the Macbeth. One of them that had Macbeth on it, and I said, hey, you. So it tells half of them, or it tells them all. Half the words in there go, I can buy that, I like it, it feels right. The other half are going to go, oh, come on. Half of them have always got to say, oh, come on. Half of them have got to represent the mode wherein they are resisting that which would be destabilizing change. And change is not just something physical. It's not just some sort of geological or racial or physical upheaval of humans or the planet. It's information. If information comes out, such as me telling that word Do you realize that you guys are not a bunch of individual words? You are a play. You're a play that is famous on the planet Earth. And they don't know what the planet Earth is. So to him, I'm talking about the universe or the heavens. It is something so transcendental to that level that it is as though literally there was another dimension added to it. But they cannot perceive what the dimension is, and if it is wired up in the people involved or the words involved enough that they have some interest in it, it has got to take on, perforce, transcendental trappings. That this is from some other world, this is from some other universe, this is from some other creatures, guides, spirits. And all they're saying is, this is so complex, I cannot see it. This is so enriched. Complex is a better word right now. It is just so complex that I don't know what. I can hear the words, part of it I understand. But obviously part of it I don't understand. And if they could play the part of my fictitious, reasonable, insane person, I could say, well, why do you say obviously part of it you don't understand? Because if you don't understand it, how can you say that you obviously don't understand it? And all it is that non-specific awareness in, still flowing through human intelligence, that there's more to this than's going on, than I can see going on. There's something else. Right. There is another dimension. There is a complexity that is too fast, too slow, too wide, too narrow, to fit into one scant lifetime. The tempos are different. It'd be like trying to play, getting up to the grand finale of, say, the 1812 Overture. And it'd be like, I know this is not musically correct, so don't anybody write me, but it'd be like them getting down to the final climax and the violins, all the strings, all the horns, playing at a certain tempo. And let's just say, for the sake, since I picked out this example, I'm stuck with it, that only one time does the timpani player hit one time during the grand finale of the last 3 minutes. Do you understand, if you're operating at different tempos, the violins in those last 3 minutes or 200 measures may have played 770 notes. The timpani player had to sit there and go through those same measures and count and keep his place, and went boom. Existence, if those notes would knock the words in my box of Macbeth, or the 6 billion people here, and then think if there were billions and billions of other entities in the universe operating at different tempos, at different areas within what you think of as the electromagnetic spectrum, but that one timpani note, boom, in the midst of 220 before, 220 after, and of course I arbitrarily picked that out because the 1812 Overture is much longer than that. And even if we expanded far enough that I saw there were 6 billion notes in front and 6 billion after that. And you thought, well, that covered it. No, it didn't cover it, because 1812 Overture is not the only piece of music that ever been written. It would just go on, and ordinary intelligence will finally just lose all interest, because it cannot go into a dimension to wherein this makes any sense. But you would be like one note in the midst of an almost, to you, infinite number of notes. That is, there were so many that you lost interest, you lost count, and you went boom. That's what you saw as being your life, or boom, that one note. That's what you saw as being all that a human could understand in one lifetime. And yet, it's almost as though you got an awareness that, God, there sure is a whole lot of other music going on. You seem to be kind of distracted that you got to watch your place, that you got this one time. Of course, to you it seems like 6 to 8 years to go boom. But it's like there's sure a whole lot of other stuff going on, and it seems like so much before and maybe so much after, and it's all around me, and but you know, what does it got to do with me? And you got to keep counting, you're going to lose your no. There is a resistance absolutely necessary. There is a balance, and even that does not describe it in a more enriched, or what would be a more complex, enriched world, because it's not just yin and yang, or this or that, or up and down here, but even here you have got to see that there has to be an up for every down. There is a balance, and it is only the unbalanced, not in some psychiatric sense, but that is the less than completed human nervous system through the intellect that perceives, that thinks that things are out of balance, that things were better yesterday, and do not tell me that they weren't. Well, wait a minute, I don't get in a theoretical discussion. Let me tell you this. My neighborhood was safer. I made more money 2 years ago than I do now. Tell me that that is not going backwards. Not just me, everybody at the plant. Since they busted the union, we're making less money, all of us. Now tell me things are getting better. Tell me that I shouldn't look fondly on the past, at least in that one area. Well, what can you say? If you're operating at that level of intelligence, if you're swimming over here in the Sagara Sea, if you're swimming, wherever you're swimming, if you're swimming in the Dead Sea, and you say, boy, things are salty here, what am I going to tell you? If you're swimming in Lake Godova, and you say, my, this water is fresh. What do they mean by salt water? I don't know what it tastes like. What are you going to say to a fish like that? It's not right or wrong. Life does not send out people to go around to fish in salt water and say, naughty, naughty fish. Oh, boy, you don't know what you're missing. Get that kind of saline environment. Oh, it'd be heaven. That's not the way life works. Except, that's the way life seems to work sometimes, does it not? Things could be better. I'm not sure how. But don't you think things would be better? Yeah. Did you know that your forefathers, that is your four-fish fathers, they used to swim in a place that was better? Well, what do you mean better? Well, it didn't have salt in the water. Well, what's salt? Because that's all they know. You say, well, imagine a place, what's your complaint about being here? And they got some fish complaint. You say, all right, at one time, fishes did not have those kind of complaints, and that's what I mean about salt water. Sin. Things are changing too fast. The fish have not. The environment has changed, and now you're having to try and react to it, and it makes you little fish sort of, and the fish says, irritable? That's it. Am I right or not? And the fish go, yeah. Every solar system, and what appears to be inside of you and outside of you, or vice versa, has a balance. Every planet in the solar system has a balance, if they're alive. The balance is parts of it wired up, creatures and otherwise, all entities, where I started telling you tonight, that as they become more complex, they take on a new and never predicted, that is by those involved, those there alive, the fish alive then, the words alive in that box from Macbeth. It is never expected, it cannot be predicted, and it's irritating. And they do not see, they cannot think of the full complexity of the new dimension. All they know is they're fucking what? Irritated. Then there's some. And by some, remember, this can happen on one planet, so it's not one group of people solidified and all they do is look fondly to the past, and this group over here is stabilized in such a way that they never look favorably at the past. You know, if you believe that, God Almighty. I don't want to make a crude joke. All you got to do is look into your own solar system, your own universe, but to see that you are generally wired up to look fondly upon the past. Even if you want to blame it, even if it apparently is suitable to blame external stimuli, I don't care. Take your best shot. But just notice. You can hear, you talked about history. You laughed about me making this silly example of the fondness you may still feel toward the early 1400s. But it seems to be something set out there, some external stimuli to bring up the past of yesterday, last week, 500 years ago, 2,000 years ago. There is built into people the specific inclination to finally look backwards. Even if it's just that fast, it goes on continually. then there is that wired up in your same nervous system as your same universe, or you would not still be functioning, that does have the passing apparent ability to do otherwise. Or else you would be completely debilitated. You could not function. You would not get up. So there's both of this going on your planet, in your nervous system. I would try and suggest that the most fertile place still, that many of you may think that you've seen all you care to see, is why is it that everyone really wants to suffer a little? Really prepared to, you want to. Which is a looking fondly to the past. No matter what the words are, it's that everybody wants to suffer a little. To what possible end, what possible sense, and you can't get it from the information that is visually available on this planet, but to what possible ends is this thing that we're in, this universe, this life, continues to become more and more complex. So all you got to do is have a good three-dimensional running view of what's going on a warm day and realize things are not going downhill. Maybe I'm going downhill, but God, things aren't going downhill. For that to go on, for you to have a clear, irrefutable sight of that, and then in the midst of that, to realize that you and everyone else are generally wired up whenever they're prodded to finally look backwards, and to a large degree want to, at least sometimes, to some degree, to suffer. In other words, how is it that we are in the midst, that we are a part of the soldiers right out front of life's expansion, in the midst of this kind of flourishing, growth, and there in the midst of it seem to be plagued by an inescapable sense of doom. And at times you're not, is to think, well, it could be. I shouldn't be so happy because I know what'll happen. Tomorrow I'll blow it all. You don't find that even interesting. Of course, there is no three-dimensional. That is, there is no dichotomous-based answer to that. The only answer that one has got to see to ever start reaching escape velocity from this planet is, hey, I just realized why you can't answer such questions as that on this planet. Because there is no answer on this planet to that question. Then you got something. Then you begin to suspect, or you begin to enjoy some of my present maps to tell you that there's another dimension. That the information is not wrong, it's just incomplete. All the data, all the essential data available to individuals and to humanity as a whole, it's not wrong, it's not stupid. And I say it's flawed, but perhaps to some of you, if you still get hung up on that, is look at it as incomplete. It's not that the information that you do have is wrong. When I say it's flawed, it's taken as being more or less a general statement of things as they are. Notwithstanding that in the sciences that they will say, well, perhaps we'll learn a little more tomorrow. But the general kinds of thinking that makes humans humans, they believe that the general areas of inquiry, of interest, of importance has already been talked about. That the questions that should be the motivating energy behind a good, decent, intelligent life have already been asked. Now what we got to do is come up with the damn answers. Now if there's any chance of you ever getting off this planet, you got to very quickly get to the point of, wait a minute, I know why they were already stating the questions 3,000 years ago, the same ones. And I know why that they can't come up with an answer. It's because there is no answer. Not in some kind of existentialist or Dada philosophy of, well, you know, it's all relative and who knows and who cares. No. No, scientifically, in the specific area of non-specific physics. That the reason that there is no answer is because there is no answer. It is not a complete question. What? Any question. Any question that you can come up with is an incomplete question. And yet you can't go anywhere with that if you're left with ordinary intelligence. Because you can say, well, it is a complete question because I'm asking you this one thing. Is the Bible the Word of God or not? Is morality objective or subjective? Now, that's a complete question. Maybe you don't know the answer, but don't tell me this crap that that's not a complete question. That's a question, whether you like it or not. No, it ain't. And you got to see. Because if you could see that way, then you'd say, all right, why can no one answer that? Why can't even I answer that to satisfy myself? I'm just me. Why can't I go, all right, I choose column A. I choose the first answer. No, well, wait a minute. All right, sometimes maybe, yeah, sometimes. Why? Not because you don't know. It's not because nobody knows. It's because it's an incomplete question. But the question could not be more complete, could it? I want to know one thing. Is the answer yes or no? Just, I want to know that. If you know, is it yes or no? That is an incomplete question. You're nuts. It's a simple question. Is it A or B? No. There's only two choices. A and B. Right or wrong, true or false. Is it true or false? I'm sorry, that's an incomplete question. You are absolutely nuts. Okay. To play silly for a second, if life did wander off on its own, ordinary people, and really took up the ability to start igniting their own brain cells, would you think that somewhere along the way that somebody, not mechanically, not just drifting along on autopilot, but that someone would in some way have forced themselves, perhaps fatally, in the brain for a few seconds though, and went, wait a minute, the reason nobody can answer any of these questions, and all the questions are quite simple, forget that they are theologically complex. The question itself is always simple. Is it yes or no, what I just said? We got the premise here, we got the question. Now is the answer this or that? Yes or no, true or false? That somebody would have gone, wait a minute, I can feel it in my nervous system. For 3,000 years people have been asking that. I've been asking that. I can hear them down in here. They're not in the 1400s. They're down about 14 inches in my nerve. They're down there and they're asking it and nobody's ever known. And I suddenly realized why. Or why hadn't everybody ever thought that the reason is that question of, is it this or that? There's only two things, this and that. That the reason nobody can answer it is, that's not the full question. Of course, right then, if this fictitious scenario I just made up, that kind of ordinary person, I guess would give a whole new definition of some kind of brain hemorrhage. I can just see blood flying out. It'd be an explosion. That would be the added dimension. That would be a new dimension to ordinary thought processes. Even those thought processes that are on this planet pass for being extraordinary, geniuses, educated, determined people. I don't care how damn educated they get. All you got to do is pick up and read. It can be whoever's the world's leading physicist today, leading biologist, leading theologian, leading philosopher. And what the hell are they talking about? They may now be using some new jargon that they may sound to be up to date, even more complex, talking about the world of particle physics, the world of some kind of new abstract reconstructionism of religious literature or literature itself. But they're still talking about the same thing. It's always down that I've been pondering this problem now for well into 5 decades. I guess in probably my humble efforts is why they've awarded me those several Nobels and this and that. And I think we're getting closer to it. And what are they getting closer to? You don't have to listen any further. You can leave. Even if you come early and think good, you can always go home soon. And sometimes you can get your money back for the ticket, but that's another story. You don't have to wait, because the person's about to say that we all know by now, at least us who are in the field, we all know that it's coming down, that sooner or later, when we're getting closer, that we're going to be able to answer what we've all wanted to know, and that is, and here it comes, is it this or that? And they can be talking about particle physics, something that seems to be so arcane that only a handful of people know what they're talking about. Maybe. Chemistry. Religion. But it doesn't matter what the field is. The question is always, is it this or that? Now I know to some of you laymen out there that the terms I've had to use discussing this funny universe that we're finding, once we've even gone deeper into quantum mechanics, the actual fabric, the molecules, the bread and the yeast, the reality itself. I know that some of the things I've described tonight or tried to talk about are so obscure, so unexpected that I wasn't trying to impress you people, but there's just no way to describe some of this. So to let me end my talk to you tonight to simply point out what we're trying to get at, and here it comes. When he says, I'm gonna put it to you, what he's about to say is it this or that? That's what it always is. And you think, wait a minute. I listened to all this. This man went to school. He's received all these awards. And in fact, I found some of it kind of hobbyfyingly interesting what he talked about tonight. But now he's coming down to that same old crowd. What he's saying is, well, it's only taken a handful of us since that first generation of the, especially the European, the post-Einstein generation of physicists, and we've had to work our way down to this. But by God, a few more $1 billion, a few more hours in the lab, we're getting so close. Really, I wish I could convey to you the enthusiasm some of us feel. They're down there in the trenches working on this. But let me just tell you this. The whole idea about worrying about whether there's a God or intelligence behind the universe or whatever it is, here it comes. Don't care what field it is. Here it comes. He's about to say, we're getting so close to being able to say definitively whether it's this or that. Oh, we're so close. No, they're not. They're no closer than they were. Well, this, of course, is not true because humanity is closer than they were 3,000 years ago, except closer to what? The what has expanded. So relatively speaking, it doesn't matter whether they're close or not. But what they're about to say is, we're getting so close to being able to tell you whether it's this or that. And life won't let it doesn't have the need to let humans somewhere go, wait a minute. It doesn't matter what the field is, it doesn't matter what kind of progress they're making or lack of progress, it's always the same question. Is it this or that? And the reason they can't answer it is, the question of is it this or that is not a complete question. And again, I'll speak up for ordinary intelligence. It goes, what? You just said it's got to be this or that, and so to decide if it's this or that, and then to say that doesn't complete it all, it always completes it all. Whatever you're talking about, whether it's physics, morality, economics, you always split up and say, all right, here's what we're talking about. Now, we'll expand it in a minute, but we got to start off, we're either talking about this or that. Right. It ain't right. You're talking about this or that is the necessary balance to keep ordinary human intelligence operating in the way in which it should be operating, to keep things stabilized, to be the right kind of pull, the right kind of attempt at the avant-garde, the ridiculous, that which is going to be so radical in the arts, economics, everything. It's all the same thing. There's no difference between art and economics or religion and politics. It is the life, but there has to be that that's pulling this way, and it's not just out there, and there has to be that which says, wait a minute, I'm a down-home person, I'm conservative, I can't stand that kind of change. There has to be that in every solar system, or that solar system would fly apart. There has to be that on every planet, or the planet itself would fly apart. There has to be that in the human nervous system, or your nervous system would fly apart. And of course, since this is not simply a retelling of the, albeit strange and unexpected, descriptions of humanity that I give, the point is not having mechanically and automatically is a few people making themselves not fly apart, but being able to fly away from what they are. There's a difference between your planet blowing up and disintegrating, which is nothing. You can do that. You can do that with the old screwdriver and hammer Heinrich maneuver to your brain, as I've told you. You can do that and make your solar system fly apart, but there's another one of you being able to, here, fly off your own planet. Because you don't destroy it. It didn't have to come apart. You simply fly off. But we ran out of tape, and so I was going to tell you all about that, but I guess we'll have to wait. I'll try to think about it some other time. Au revoir.